Hey friend, in today's watercolor landscape tutorial, I'm going to teach step-by-step how to paint Mount Rainier National Park during the winter season. Without further ado, let's get painting. For today's tutorial, I'll be using black, Payne's gray, Prussian blue, Perlyene green, pink, yellow, and purple by Winsor & Newton. I'll also be using a little bit of white gouache by Winsor & Newton. And the brushes I'm using today are size 2, 6, and size 16 round brush. And the paper I've taped down here is a size 5 by 7 inches. To start our painting, I'm going to take some really watered down Prussian blue as our sketch color just to get the layout of our composition. I'm going to start by doing a really watered down faint sketch of Mount Rainier. It's going to be more towards the right area here, and it's a very dome-like structure. It's not got like a super pointed peak, it's a little bit more broad and round. So there's just a really loose, broad, round peak here. Then from here on the left of Mount Rainier, we have a little, almost like subtle triangle and a couple more subtle triangle shapes on the left side as well. Next, I'm gonna carry on and do a peak towards the left that's slightly taller than these other two. And with that peak, I'm going to kind of allow it to slope towards the right. Once we get to halfway down the page, I'm going to lower this slope of this mountain down below, just like that. And then I'm going to paint the silhouette of our lake here. And I'm going to start it a couple inches below this initial peak here towards the left. And I'm just going to do a rounded curve to start, kind of like an upside down C curve. And then from here, it's going to have some irregular jaggedness to the border of the lake. So I'm going to do a few kind of pointed, elongated curves here. So there's some points and then some C curves mixed in. So I did about 3 of those, just like so. And then here we will have some taller pine trees kind of covering the border of the bottom of the lake. Now moving on, I want to start with our sky first. And I'm going to take our largest brush, the size 16 brush, and I'm just going to do a wash of water. And I'm going to paint all the way to the borders of the painter's tape and up against the border of the silhouette of the sketches that we did. So I'm just going to take my time painting alongside the sketch. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears to my medium-sized brush, my size 2 brush, and I'm going to take a little bit of yellow to start, and I'm just going to add, using a left to right motion with my brush, in the bottom inch of the painting, I'm going to paint some pops of yellow. And I'm painting alongside the edges of the peaks. And it's just kind of a loose, watery version of the yellow. It's not too bright. And the water kind of helps tone it down a little. So now I'm going to take some of our pink, and it's going to allow some orange to come through as it slightly overlaps onto the yellow. So I'm just going to do a couple touches of the pink, slightly overlapping here. Well, it's not slightly overlapping, it's quite overlapping. quite a bit here, and that's perfect. That's what we want. And we're gonna have some of that yellow popping through, which I really like. It's like this sherbet kind of color. And then from here, I'm going to do some hot pink right above here. I'm gonna do it kind of unevenly. Going to drag it down a little bit so it kind of blends with what's below. So I did like a chunk here and a little bit of a chunk there, leaving a white space in the left area and some in the right area. Now I'm going to take some purple. I'm gonna put some purple over here towards the left. Couple good layers of that, and then I'm gonna do just a little bit of purple towards the right, maybe just like one layer. And I'm gonna take a clean brush with some water and kind of help blend that purple in with the pink and all of that. So if you just want a softer bleed and blend, water with a clean brush will do the trick. And now I want to take a little bit of Prussian Blue, and I'm going to layer some of the Prussian Blue on the purple. And that's going to create this nice like soft blue lavender. I'm going to add just a touch of it into the pink as well, just to add some variegation in the sky and some texture. And then I just take a clean brush with a little bit of water on it to kind of help blend some of this. I'm gonna add a little touch of pink overlapping on the yellow again over here. Just a couple touches. And over here, I'm just gonna take a clean brush just to glide that pink into some of the purple. And then just dragging it down into some of the faint yellow down below. And then from here, I'm gonna take a little bit more yellow and add just a couple touches of some brighter yellow here and there in the lower area. A little bit in this blank space here too. Maybe dragging it into the pink over towards the left. So what's fun about sunsets is yours may look different from mine, but the idea is we have our lighter colors down below and it gradually incorporates to some deeper, darker colors up above. And the way the water moves, it may have some variety in the direction it goes. So there's not a wrong way to do this. So long as you have that gradation of the light to the dark colors, that's what you want. I'm gonna layer in a little bit more blue towards this corner, towards the left, and I'm gonna do the same thing towards the right a little bit. I'm also gonna add a touch, the tiniest touch of Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is super potent, so a little goes a very long way, but I just wanna deepen some of that Prussian Blue a little bit more. And just kind of take some of the brightness out by adding in this Payne's Gray element. And again, a little goes a very long way. And then I'm just gonna take a clean brush and just kind of buff it out by dragging it down slightly. I'm even incorporating it just a little bit in between here. Okay, I love the colors here. So pretty. I'm going to add a touch more vivid pink towards the right here. I just want like a nice secondary area of a bright pink because we have one here, and I think just having a second area will just kind of help balance it just a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna let our sky dry. Sometimes it's hard to know when to stop, but I'm just gonna let that set. And while it sets, I'm gonna move on to our pond. Not our pond, it's a huge lake. And I'm gonna paint some water over here, just all around the borders. Okay, now I'm gonna grab my size 6 brush and I'm gonna tap into a little bit of Payne's Gray. And I basically just wanna start with a subtle wash of Payne's Gray all throughout the pond, the lake. I'm so silly. And just kind of incorporate that as just like a general backdrop color to incorporate all over the pond. And now what I want to do is start to do some very soft, subtle reflection. So I'm going to start with a little bit of yellow. I'm just going to tap in a couple areas of yellow in here, just towards the top border. And then I'm just going to buff it out a little bit. We just want a hint of yellow, not too much. Now I'm going to take some of the pink, and I just want a couple just variegated random spots of the pink. And then once I apply a few dabs of that, I'm going to take some water, plain water on my brush, and buff out the pink just to create kind of this soft blur effect from the reflection of the lake. It's going to be the running joke. Okay, so this is going to be a lot softer than the sky above, or there's a little bit more, there's still soft blends here, but the lake is more delicate, I would say, in the blends. So I'm going to take my brush and kind of blend some of the yellow down into the pink to get even further soft bleeds. The yellow is going to be very, very subtle. The next thing I want to do is take a blend of Prussian Blue with a touch of Payne's Gray, and I'm just going to incorporate some pops of that color. So I kind of just tapped my brush into literally just both Prussian Blue and Payne's Gray, both colors. And I'm just adding a few touches of that, very loose and random. Then I'm rinsing my brush off and just taking some plain, clean water on my brush. And then I'm just using the belly side of my brush here to just softly bleed and blend some really loose curves and just kind of like a circular motion of this color. And then I do want to get a touch more Payne's Gray and purple in there. So I'm gonna first start with the purple before I do the Payne's Gray and add just a few touches of this subtle purple. Just like that, and then a few touches of the Payne's Gray in just the lower bottom area, just like so. And then I'm going to take a clean brush and just kind of loosely combine that color. Okay, And I'm just gonna allow the lake to fully set as well as the sunset. So in about 5-7 minutes, we'll come back and start working on our Mount Rainier. All right, now that our lake and our sky is dry, let's move on to Mount Rainier. I'm gonna mix an even blend of a combo of Prussian Blue and some Payne's Gray. So I'm just toning down the Payne's Gray just a bit, so just equal parts of both. And to that combo, I want to mix just a small, faint amount of black. Very, very subtle. I'm just gonna do a little bit of black just to tone it down, just a hair bit. And then I'm also gonna add in a touch more of water with my brush to tone down this color. And on the back here, I'm just gonna show what I have. So I've got this like kind of dusty blue color, and that's kind of what I'm going for. And now I want to take my size 6 brush to start, and I just want to add some shading over towards the right side of Mount Rainier to begin. I'm just going to paint all along this sketch edge here, just like so. And then I'm going to take a little bit more paint, kind of layer on just another touch of this shaded color. And then I'm going to take some water this time and kind of subtly drag out that pigment just a bit more. And then I want to take some of that pigment and kind of paint this loose S-curve shape that's kind of sloping downward. And then I'm also going to paint an area where it kind of goes towards the right. Next, I'm going to add just a touch of that shaded color, whatever's left on my brush, down below this kind of Y shape. There's kind of like an upside down Y shape here. I'm just going to tap in a little bit of texture with the tip of my brush there. Now I'm going to take a little bit more water and kind of buff out some of this uneven water line edge here. Just kind of softening that just a hair bit. And then while that sets a little bit longer, I'm going to go ahead and add just a few touches of texture on this left side. And I'm just tapping in a little bit of texture using the tip of my brush, allowing some of the white to pop through. And then next, I'm gonna take the faintest, barely anything, but just the faintest amount of pink, very, very faint and subtle. And I'm gonna add a little wash of pink on this left side of Mount Rainier, just to kind of have a little bit of soft reflection of the sunset above. It's just super subtle. The pink is very strong, so a little goes a very long way. And now I'm going to take more of our blue mixed color, and I'm just going to fill in just a light dusting of this color all over these tiny smaller peaks, just as a fill in here. Then I'm going to take a little bit of Payne's Gray while it's still wet, and alongside the right edge, I'm going to just fill in a little bit of Payne's Gray just to give each peak some shading here. It's okay if it subtly bleeds out a little bit. That's totally fine. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of the remaining Payne's Gray on my brush just down below. That's just our very subtle, distant detail over there. Now I'm going to take some more of our blue mixture, and I want to paint kind of a cast shadow of an area here towards the right. I'm going to do a little bit of layering here. And then I'm keeping the edges kind of jagged. And I'm gonna bring some of this color sloping towards the center and kind of like a loose peak, just like so. And then I'm just gonna drag a little bit of my brush on the belly of the brush to add a little bit of texture there. So just kind of below here, that's how I got this jagged, rough texture. And now I'm going to do the same thing over on this slope towards the left. I just want to add another layer of that blue and then just kind of tap and add some more jagged texture towards the right. Just kind of tapping my brush. And I'm going to continue that layer of shading off towards the right here and then kind of drag it slightly downward and make another kind of loose triangle shape here. You can see the subtle triangle shape. Okay, and now that our pink wash here is almost dry, I'm just gonna tap in a little bit more texture using the tip of my brush with our blue blend. I'm just adding a few taps of irregular texture here, just like that. And then from here, I'm going to layer just a little bit more of our blue blend. Just kind of building the values and the layers of color. I'm going to add just a little bit of texture with the tip of my brush towards the right. And then just incorporating that texture kind of subtly throughout. And I'll add just a little bit more towards the right, just adding in a few more shadows, kind of loosely here, just kind of layering a little bit of texture. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit of a more jagged edge using my size 6 brush, continuing with that same size. I'm gonna use that blue mixture just to add a little bit of a subtle jaggedness towards the border of Rainier meeting the sky. I'm just gonna add a couple kind of jagged point areas. Right up here, you could see this kind of subtle point. And then I'm just gonna do that over towards the right as well. Just a little bit less of a perfect round surface. Just a little bit more variegation here. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just allow this to set. We will come back with a few more finishing details there once it's dry, but now we can move on to the lower mountain here, which is going to be pretty simple. I'm now going to take just plain Payne's gray and I'm going to mix it into the blend that we have previously with the touch of black and the Prussian blue. And then to the Payne's gray added back in, I'm going to add a touch of a little bit more black. Okay, so now what I want to do is paint kind of like this really deep color. I'm leaving a subtle gap here, just like so, of the white because I am going to have some pine trees there. But I'm just going to start by adding this really loose wash of the Payne's gray. And then from there, or the Payne's gray blend that we just did. From there, I'm going to take some water, and pulling from that, I'm simply just going to add a little bit more texture, just like so, and really shade the right side of this peak in particular. And pulling from that, I'm just gonna kind of drag out a little bit of that color towards the left. Just a little bit, but it's still highlighted more there. I'm gonna leave some of this white fleck here, like that's remaining, because I like kind of the variegation of the pops of white. Now I'm gonna just tap in a little bit more of that Payne's gray blend, just a touch more. And I'm also gonna add a few just moments of texture, just tapping the Payne's gray to give a little bit of more variegation in the mountain surface here. So I'm just kind of gently tapping that, just like so. And now I'm going to take some water with my brush and just kind of buff out the border of this Payne's gray. And the reason I'm doing that is so that way the pine trees have a chance to not have this jagged block of Payne's gray painting over as we overlap the pine trees. I just don't want like this harsh Payne's gray quality. I'm just going to soften this edge here just a little bit. Okay, so I've let just some texture kind of pop in here. I'll add some more later. In the meantime, we can come back to Mount Rainier, and I'm gonna take some of this Payne's gray blend that we did, and I wanna add a few darker pops to Mount Rainier. So I'm gonna start over towards the far right. I'm gonna add just a tap of some darker elements here. I'm adding just a couple irregular shapes towards the right to start. Then I'm gonna tap in just a little bit more off towards the right here, kind of in this upside down Y shape. I'll add a little bit up here as well, keeping it super loose. Maybe some in here too. And then kind of some alongside this curve here, just tapping in a little bit more dark contrast. I'm gonna add some right along here as well, kind of sloping downward. And just a little bit coming off the top. And then a hint over towards the left as well, kind of sloping downward towards the left side of the page. So just a couple areas, and then just a hint up top as well, more towards the left side of the peak. And then just a couple taps in this center blank area. And a little bit down here as well. Okay, so that just kind of added just a little bit more detail to Rainier. And I'm just keeping this super loose. And here and there, I'll just kind of find an area where I might want to revisit and just come back in with some more texture. And now I'm going to move on towards the left or the right side of these peaks here, just adding in a little bit more finishing detail. Just kind of tapping a little bit of texture. Mainly towards the right side. Okay, so now I want to move on to our trees. And for our trees, I'm going to mix in some Perlyene Green into our mixed color that we've just been working with. I still want some undertones of blue mixed into the Perlyene Green. I'm going to add just a touch of Payne's gray into the Perlyene Green as well. Okay, so to start, I'm gonna do a very subtle wash of this combination of the Payne's gray and the Perlyene Green. And what I'm gonna do is just manually paint in a border right alongside this edge. And that's where some snow is gonna be remaining alongside the water line of the pond. I'm also gonna paint a little bit of an overlap here of this color that's gonna kind of swoop into the lake. I'm so silly. I don't know why my brain is glitching there, so funny. And from there, I'm just gonna fill this area in with a nice wash of this color. I'm gonna take some paint up there and bring it down here. So just around this area is when that kind of subtle jagged white border starts. And then I'm just going to take a little bit more of that color, just kind of fill in towards the left, slightly overlapping on that mountain area. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our Perlyene Green and Payne's Gray, and I want to make a few pine trees starting over towards the top. What I'm going to first do is add this really jagged texture, going up and down using my size 2 brush. I'm just doing this subtle texture all alongside this edge, kind of going up and down. From here, I want to have a few pops of some dainty distant pine trees incorporated, but I don't necessarily need to do that all throughout. So I'm just going to add maybe like, let's say 10 smaller pine trees or so. And then from here, once I've added those dashes, I'm going to take the tip of my brush and really lightly tap this loose kind of dainty triangle shape with texture all around using my size 2 brush, and really light pressure to get this kind of delicate, faint pine tree texture. And you can even add some daintier texture, just blotting some more of that towards the surface where the border of the trees meets the mountain. And then I'm just doing some finishing dainty pine trees here. Okay, so now I want to add just a few larger trees down towards the bottom, and I'm going to start with 2 off towards the side, maybe a bigger one that's taller than that, and then a couple more that are kind of similar to these first 2, and then some kind of off towards the side here, just like that. And then I'm just gonna mimic that kind of textured cone shape for these bottom pine trees as well. All right, now that these pine trees are done, I'm kind of revisiting the slope of this area, and I kind of want the pine trees here to appear higher to kind of show that the slope of the pine trees is moving upward instead of kind of straight across. So I'm just going to simply elongate some of these pine trees off towards the right just to be a bit higher to get kind of that slope kind of feel. So from there, I'm just going to fill in some texture on either side, allowing some of the white snow from Mount Rainier to kind of pop through the bristles and the texture of the trees here. Just want to get that kind of feel of like some variety in the composition. And this is totally optional. You don't necessarily have to do this if your pine trees that you laid out before you're super happy with. So don't feel like you absolutely have to do that. Okay, so now what I would like to do is add in some texture to kind of mimic some pine trees that are here below. So what I'm gonna do for that is just take first our size 6 brush, mix up some more Perlyene Green and some Payne's Gray. And all I want to do is kind of paint a few touches with some gaps in between using this color. So I'm just getting this really unique, simple texture with some gaps of the wash color in between. And then once we get closer to this border, I'm just going to tap in the texture just towards the bottom here. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears to my size 2 brush. And what I want to do is now just add a few touches of some trees kind of scattered throughout. So I'm going to lay out just a few simple vertical lines to act as trunks. So I'm using these vertical lines to act as a guide of where I'm adding some more of these trees. So I'm just kind of tapping in just a few little vertical lines here. Okay, and around each one, I'm simply just going to do kind of that loose pine tree shape, mimicking a cone with bristles and texture on either side. So this is just a very loose interpretation of a forest. It's kind of abstract and not perfectly cookie cutter, because we really wouldn't see exactly every tree in person to the naked eye, like in exact detail. It would all kind of start to mesh and blend quite a bit. But we would of course see the bordering trees like we have here, and some towards the bottom as well. So I'm just kind of adding in that texture for each vertical line, just like so. And then you can even tap your brush to fill in even more texture in some of the blank areas that have more of the undertone color popping through. So I'm just going to carry on and do that amongst each vertical line that I've laid out. Now that I've added that pine tree texture in here, all I'm doing in this lower right corner is just adding a little bit of a second layer of texture to this line of pine trees that's kind of more in the forefront, because it's going to appear slightly darker because it's kind of more towards us and that's more faint in the background. So I just kind of re-emphasize that by layering it a little bit more. Now what I want to do is take our size 6 brush and take just some Payne's Gray, watered down, and add a soft kind of Payne's Gray watery edge up against our lake, slightly overlapping on the snow as well. That's just going to add a little bit of connecting texture to our lake here and where the snow meets the lake as well. So it's just super loose, slightly jagged. And I'm going to take a little bit of water to then kind of add some pressure with my brush to buff out the border where the snow meets the pine trees, just so it's a little less harsh. And then I'm just kind of re-accentuating that shaded border on the shore with whatever pigment is left on my brush here. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little bit of Payne's Gray, just plain old Payne's Gray, and then just add in a little bit more texture towards the right side of the peak here. I'm just kind of tapping in a little bit more of a secondary shadow, just very loose and unevenly, just to add a little bit more depth. Not going too overboard to where I'm concealing the top of this pine tree border. So it's more towards the top of the peak, and then from there I can kind of buff it out as it gets closer to the pine trees. Okay, so last step, I'm going to take a little bit of white gouache and just tap in a very faint touch of some hints of white gouache into our painting here. And I'm just going to use my brush to re-wet some of the white gouache I have remaining on my palette from other paintings. And with that, I'm just going to tap in just a little hint of some white texture on the left side and a hint of some towards the right, just as a dusting of snow and just a pop of some highlight and variegation into these mountains up close. Just adding a little bit of a white here, and then I'm just going to tap some white as well over towards the other side. And again, I'm not going too overboard. I just want a light dusting of some snow kind of popping through. And I feel like our Mount Rainier has enough highlights, I would say. So I'm not going to go too overboard with that. But I think that just added a little bit more texture on the mountains that are slightly closer to us. Thank you so much for joining me for today's watercolor Mount Rainier National Park in winter landscape. This was so much fun to paint, and I hope that you enjoyed this one. Be sure to like this video or comment down below what kind of landscapes you would like to see next, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any further tutorials.